Okay, you have received a map from me that you should plan on filling in. It is also available online on Canvas and you can print it out. There will be a map on the next test. So take good detailed notes, and I might even throw in some little extra credit bonuses here. I'm going to begin by framing this map by talking about the different bodies of water. For our purposes, the upper right-hand corner, the Caspian Sea, this is all off the map biblically, so you don't need to worry about those. Although it is interesting that this little body of water, which is known as Lake Umia, I believe it's pronounced, is a salt lake in modern-day Iran, which is at 10% the size it was 50 years ago. It's basically disappearing, and now you have ships that are stranded tens of miles from any water, and it's not deep enough to float most of these ships anyways. So let's begin with what you probably already know and recognize, and that is the Mediterranean Sea over here. The word Mediterranean means middle of land. It is surrounded by Africa, Asia Minor, Turkey. It contains Greece and Italy, if I get off the map, and the island of Cyprus. This is the western boundary of the Promised Land that we will talk about in the Bible. Over on the bottom here, we have the Red Sea, which will become important when we get into the book of Exodus and tell the story of Moses. On the far right over here, we have the Persian Gulf, and you are all young enough that you do not remember the Gulf Wars, but the Persian Gulf is where Iran and Iraq and the Middle Eastern powers ship a lot of their oil. And then two smaller bodies of water that I actually had to draw onto this map. The Sea of Galilee will become very important when we get to the New Testament in second semester and talk about Jesus. It is a small freshwater body of water about 500 feet below sea level. And then the Dead Sea, which is a salty body of water more than 1,000 feet below sea level, the lowest point on the face of the earth. And as the name implies, it is so salty that nothing can live there. These two seas are connected by the Jordan River. And those of you who have been at a Catholic school or have some basic knowledge of Christianity will know that the Jordan River is where Jesus is baptized. And these three bodies of water essentially form the eastern boundary for the Promised Land. Oh, got a couple more rivers. The Nile River is what flooded annually in Egypt and brought a great deal of fertility there. And then moving up into the northeastern part of our map, we have two rivers, and those rivers are the Tigris and the Euphrates. Excuse me. On the test, people often mix these up. I don't have a great mnemonic, although a student last year said the Tigris is on top. It is the northernmost of the two rivers, if that helps you at all. And hopefully you've had some geography in social studies classes before, so you're not learning about these for the very, very first time. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers bound an area of the world that is known as Mesopotamia. And if you are a fan of animals, you might see the word hippopotamus in here. A hippo is a horse, and potamia means river. So a hippopotamia is a river horse, and Mesopotamia means in the middle of rivers. This is the area between and around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which, as with the Nile down in Egypt, flooding led these to be very, very fertile areas, and this is where human civilization really emerged and began to flourish in Egypt and in Mesopotamia. And also, in this little strip of land here. And even though Canaan doesn't have a huge river running through it that floods like Egypt and Mesopotamia, this area also experienced a mild climate and a fertile country. And then the third area here is what is known as Egypt. And these areas together, if I can kind of connect them this way, form an area of the world that is known as the Fertile Crescent, extending down the Egyptian river, which flows northward, by the way, into the delta and into the Mediterranean, including Canaan and including Mesopotamia. And this is where the stories of the Old Testament are going to take place, in the Fertile Crescent. This little peninsula down here, the Sinai Peninsula, is something that will become part of one of the stories later on, but make sure that you've labeled all these areas. I might encourage you to very, very lightly shade on your map this area of the Fertile Crescent, since that is important for understanding why the stories of the Bible emerge out of this area of the world. And that brings us to a close.